I mean, lockdown happened in like August for New Zealand, and then carried through to mid-December.
Mm.
So it's quite a long period of time. Um, but the first 6 months, everything went really well. In fact, when I was on the last podcast with Michael, I think I said to him, because that was during the year, I think I said to him, "Oh, everything's gone really well." And he said, "You shouldn't say that, Harry.
Yeah, he did.
You
Yeah.
shouldn't say that." Oh my God, like it was only a short period after that everything went wrong and we went into lockdown.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Birding Today podcast. Hope everyone's doing well out there. I'd like to start off this particular episode with a shout out, the first shout out of season 4. And if you'd like to get mentioned in these intro segments, definitely do write in if you've got something to say, whether it's good or bad about the podcast. birdingtoday@gmail.com is where I can be reached. And so I got an email from Michael Creer, who says, "Thank you for the podcast. I've recently found it through the Birder's Guide podcast, which I'm also new to. Great podcast. Check it out. Michael does some good stuff there." Michael says, "I particularly enjoyed your discussion with Jack Lange, as I can relate to the joys of being a new birder, finding lifers nearly every time I go birding." And yeah, that was a fantastic discussion I had with Jack. If you haven't listened to it yet, definitely go back and listen to that. Season 3, episode 9, I believe, Being a New Birder. Lots of great topics there, especially if you're a new birder listening, or even if you're not a new birder. Always good to kind of get into those discussions. So Michael, in his email, goes on to say, "Being oblivious to the idea of looking through binoculars at birds, it is only now at 30 I have discovered birding," which is fabulous, which is really good. So I was really happy to read that, Michael. And he finishes his email off with, "Thank you, keep up the great interviews." So yeah, thanks for that, Michael. And if you're up this way, we'll definitely get together. We're in contact by email, so that's good. Katana Wetlands is a great spot. So thank you for writing in. Okay, so just a quick reminder for everyone. There's a giveaway competition going on. If you haven't heard yet, which hopefully you have by now, but I've partnered up with Craig from Wild Portraits, Craig Boase, and I have 2 prints that are hand-drawn by Craig to give away. So beautiful prints. I'll put them up on the video here for those of you who don't know yet. It's a pardalote, a spotted pardalote, and a buff-banded rail. So all you have to do is like both our Facebook pages. So that's the Birding Today podcast and Wild Portraits Australia. And then just drop me a line, send me an email, and tell me which one of my episodes is your favourite and why. And then you'll go into the draw. I've had a couple of entries already, which is good. So it's picking up a bit, which is really nice. So a bit of competition there. And yeah, coming up is Harry Boorman, who is who was wonderful to have on the show, and we had a fantastic discussion. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Thanks for being here, everyone, and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Birding Today podcast, where birders come together to discuss the joy of birding. I'm your host, Thomas Doerig. Thank you for being with us, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm excited about today's episode because today's guest is an avid birdwatcher from Auckland, New Zealand, who attempted a big year in 2021. During this lockdown-troubled year, he still managed to travel the whole country in pursuit of birds, recording a staggering 245 species. In today's episode, he'll talk us through his journey's ups and downs, and we'll share some of the key highlights that he intends to write about in his book that should be coming out next year. Today's guest hails from the UK and has been birding since the age of 5 years old. His passion for birds started out as a passive interest as a child, which has now turned into an active obsession. He is a keen advocate for the New Zealand Bird Atlas scheme and an avid local birder. So, please welcome Harry Boorman on the show. How are you, Harry? Thanks for your time.
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's going to be a great conversation, I think, because as I was telling
you,
before we hit record, I'm fascinated with New Zealand and in many different ways, but we'll get into that a bit later. The central theme of the podcast is the joy of birding. And this is going to be interesting, I think, coming from you just fresh off a big year. So what is it about birding that brings you joy, Harry?
Well, I mean, I guess there's quite a lot of different aspects of birding and lots of different joys within that. So, I mean, there's nothing like going to your local patch or local park and just looking for birds, being surprised at what you see. You kind of in the moment birding then, it's almost like therapy or escapism or something like that. But I guess for me, a big part of birding since a very young age, I think it's what got me into it as a child was listing, maybe a bit of twitching here and there. I don't do loads of twitching, although I did last year. But yeah, I quite like just building lists, whether that be a day list, a garden list, a year list, a life list, a country list. There's something quite satisfying about doing that. And I think that because when I am listing, even when you're kind of in your local area and you see something quite different or new, it's a little bit more exciting. And yeah, so there's always that little buzz, and it's probably is the buzz that really drives me. But I don't want to sort of underplay the value of sort of everyday birding as well. It's all a joy.
Absolutely, yeah. You mentioned there's a very good word you mentioned there, buzz. Digging a bit deeper, where do you think the source of the buzz comes from? Philosophically speaking, almost.
Well, I guess it's like a dopamine hit or something, isn't it, really? So people have like a buzz from, I don't know, like racing a car or, I don't know, whatever it may be. For me, it's going out birding and just seeing something a little bit unusual. That's what gets me really excited. And yeah, I just love it. I just love all elements of it. But that buzz, that seeing something particularly rare or particularly unusual, or a tick for a year, or a life tick or something like that, it really is quite difficult to beat.
Definitely, yeah. I think when it's a rare bird or something that is uncommon, you become aware that it's a precious moment in time you're living, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And that must have been a big part of your big year. Every time you saw something, especially towards the end, I imagine, when you kept adding, to the list to your year list. And I'm excited to get into that as well later. But and this joy of birding, it starts for many birders at a very young age. And I actually listened to your episode that you did with Michael on the Birders Guide.
Oh yeah.
A while ago, and you mentioned I think it was your uncle who was quite a big influence on you, and the kingfisher. Talk us through that again. That was great.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh, it's just, I mean, it's a memorable moment. I must have been 5 years old. I can't remember exactly, but he told me about seeing a kingfisher at his work, and it's a bright blue bird. It's an exciting thing to see, even if you're not a birder. I don't think anyone can not appreciate the beauty of a common kingfisher. And I just really, really wanted to see them. And I had a few sort of books and stuff, little I Spy books that gave you a certain amount of points for birds that you saw. But you flick through that book and in England, and the kingfisher's the one that stands out, and it's the one I really wanted. And even the fact that I went looking for it on so many occasions and didn't see it, the moment that you do see it after missing, it just makes it even better, right? And I think that's quite representative of quite a lot of birds that I've seen in my life since that moment. And yeah, so I think that's what kind of got me into it, really. That first kingfisher experience was just huge. I wanted to kind of replicate that feeling again. And I've probably succeeded in doing so on quite a number of occasions, and it's just great.
Fabulous, yeah. It's. I think there's two different types of birders. Ones that gradually get into it, and others that have a pinpointed experience or a specific bird that catapults them into the passion, which is really interesting to have that distinction, because both are of course equally interesting ways to get into birding, because and of course when you would have had that kingfisher, the joy of the joy of that, it would have led onto other pathways in birding, didn't it?
Oh, definitely. And for me personally as well, I quite like experiences and stuff. I'm not a huge reader, or, I don't study birds quite in the same way as a lot of other birders do who may come through it from a more scientific background. For me, it's about the experience, and almost like what it was like for me as a kid of just seeing like a wonderful bird and then trying to see another one and then trying to see another one. That hasn't changed, it's from an early age, and I'm still really excited to carry on doing that.
Absolutely, it's a way to connect with your childhood, isn't it?
Mm,
Retrospectively, in a
yeah,
sense. And so of course, and that continues through life, and now onto the big year, which is exciting to talk about. So let's rewind right back to when you first thought about it. So what was the thought process? And maybe you'd seen other big years happening in New Zealand or elsewhere. So what were the stages in your thought process to say, okay, so talk us through it from the beginning.
yeah. I guess it was bubbling up over some time. So there were lots of stages. I'm probably not going to remember all of them, but like I guess inspired by reading the books. I just thought that they were incredible. Incredible stories like the Biggest Twitch, or the Biggest Twitch. Alan and Ruth's story when they broke a world record. I just remember reading that, just flicking through it, just going, "Oh my God, that's amazing! I'd love to do something like that." And that was the first time I'd really heard about big years. Um, and then that led on to other books, and then the film as well, which was also great.
Yeah.
Um, and it all just escalated from there. I mean, I've done a few big days or big 24-hour periods, big weekends, just informally, right, with my cousin or some of my friends, and but the idea of sort of, I don't know, when you talk about like record breaking or just doing something wonderful like traveling the world, I think that I was getting more inspired by that. And then I thought I might do one in the UK when I lived there at some point in my life. And then I moved to New Zealand, must have been about 8 years ago now. And New Zealand presents itself with a few interesting opportunities in terms of a big year. No one had really gone out and done a full big year in New Zealand. There was a big year record, but I think that the person who broke that was away for a month or two, or a extended period of time. No one had really been to all the different places of New Zealand in a single year. So that person who broke that record had been to the subantarctic islands and the Chathams, but not the Kermadec Islands. So I was kind of just looking at it going, well, what if I did all of that in one year? Like I wonder what could happen. And that was probably a big kind of key thing that was making me think, well, New Zealand is a really good place to do it. I live here. I love the country. Um, so I think that it was more of a gradual process with little steps along the way. But like each time you think of something new and your circumstances change, it kind of got more exciting as it went. And then the final straw was, I was actually planning to do it this year, by the way, not last year. Um, but a Kermadec trip was happening last year, and I thought, well, if I can combine that with the subantarctics and the Chatham Islands and just travel New Zealand, and get a lot of time off work, um, maybe it could be quite a special big year. So let's just do it. Let's just do it now. So I did it last year.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. And you mentioned all those places that are specific to the New Zealand territory, including the oceanic habitats around New Zealand, and the chunk of species that would be in your list. The percentage of them that are pelagic species must be huge, right? New Zealand is the seabird capital of the world,
Yeah.
um, which I'm sure draws a lot of birders to New Zealand. It's one of the things that I spoke to with Fraser Gurney a few episodes back, and so jumping to the kind of ups and downs, which really interest me. What was firstly, were there any? What was the biggest challenge? Because it's such a huge undertaking to do this, and so what was, if you were to put the challenges of your big year last year into a few sentences, what would that be? What were the main challenges?
Well, I guess there was one challenge that I'll just skip around and just say lockdown was a huge challenge, but it was one I wasn't expecting. Well, I kind of should have saw it coming in some ways, but I guess that doing a big year is like a logistics process, right? You need to make sure that you're at certain points in the country at certain times of year when certain trips are going ahead. You need to coordinate everything to make sure that you can squeeze it all into 365 days. Um, I'm not really amazing at project management and dates and things like that. So actually, that's quite a big challenge for me personally, right?
Yeah.
You know, there was definitely an instance where I turned up to Christchurch hoping to get to Kaikoura, and I wrongly booked my car hire for a week later on the wrong
Oh
date.
no,
So turn
really?
up late at night. I've got to leave first. I've got to leave like kind of now or first thing in the morning, and I'm stuck in Christchurch on a cold winter's day. Um, just going, I have no car. Luckily, someone come and saved me and picked me up and took me there. So it all worked out in the end. But yeah, I guess you know the logistics of it all is a real challenge in itself, and lockdown
Mm.
as well was disappointing.
Mm-hmm. And what I imagine is that the social side of life also would become complicated, right? Like for family and friends, maybe that did you see what I'm getting at in terms of
Yes, yes.
disrupting your normal routine? That was that difficult to adapt to?
Oh, definitely. So most of my social plans were out the window. I almost told quite a lot of people up front, I'm just not going to be around at weekends. So if you want to meet me, it's going to be like after work or for a coffee or something. Um, and obviously, I have a long-term girlfriend as well. We've been together 10 years, and that's it's a strain on her, right? It was something I kind of talked to her about and told her. She knew I'd wanted to do it for a long time, so she knew it was coming. So wasn't like a big shock. Um, but yeah, it was hard on her, right? Like I remember one week we went because originally I was going to do it in 2022, right? So we booked like a week away, and while I'm there, um, I was like, well, I need to sort of turn this into a bit of a big year type thing. I need to do some birding. And it was like, oh, I'll just go and see Bar now, which is up in Kaitaia. And she agreed. And then I was like, oh, well, I'm there. I might as well go out for Kiwi one evening, if that's all right. And then randomly we're sitting on a beach, and I find myself a wandering tattler that I kind of just need to get a better photo of to check that it is a wandering tattler and not a grey-tailed, right? Because it was on a rock at distance. I didn't have all my stuff with me. So yeah, I have to go back, get the camera, wade out to these rocks so I can get a better photo or a better look at it and stuff, or hear the call. That I said I'd only be gone for 45 minutes. I was gone for 3 hours. So yeah, I mean, it makes you realize, right? Like this is a indulgent, privileged thing that I've done, but it did affect other
Mm.
people. It did affect friendships, but Anita was really good about it. She was a bit angry on that particular occasion, but generally she was pretty supportive. Yeah, but it's definitely a challenge. All of that stuff, life goes out the window. You're focusing on one goal and one goal only.
Thank you for listening to the Birding Today podcast. It's great to have you with us. If you're enjoying the show, don't hesitate to leave a positive review on whichever podcast app you're using at the moment. This really helps with getting the podcast up in search results and reaching more people. Thank you, and back to the show. Forgive me if we delve a little bit deeper into the relational side of things, because
Sure.
I'm sure it interests a lot of people listening, actually, because it's not spoken about very much in the birding community, how you manage your family time with your passion, with your obsession. I'm happily married as well, and so there is always that. It's not friction as such, but it's something to manage, isn't it? And yeah. So also, even just putting the big year aside for one moment, just normal birding. Like, what do you have any thoughts or tips maybe on people who are struggling to manage their birding time with family commitments?
Well, I'm not sure I have any tips as such, because it's quite a difficult thing to manage. And it's also, you can't really switch it off, right?
Mm.
Like you're out for a meal on holiday somewhere. For me personally, I've got my binoculars on the table while we're having a romantic meal in Bali or somewhere like that, right? Just because I've never been there, something could fly by. And if it does, that's a conversation stopper, right? You suddenly look the other direction and
Definitely,
it's
definitely.
rude. It's
Yeah.
really rude. I think that luckily I've got someone who seems to be quite understanding about that particular trait, if you call it, and she's been really good about it. I know that it's caused lots of people problems in the past, right? When you're that obsessed with something, it does take over your mind. So yeah, I mean, I think that we just have an understanding that that's it. And Anita, my partner, has her hobbies as well and her specific interests, and we do pursue them.
Mm.
And yeah, but we try and find some time together as well, right? It's just last year it was going to be on a Thursday night as opposed to a weekend.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, all good points, definitely. And I think just to briefly conclude that segment of the discussion, it's similar with work, isn't it? To navigate around work as well as an added layer of obstacle, you could say, to accessing your passion as much as you'd like, but maybe you can't because you've got time commitments. How does your and I believe your work is not bird related, is it?
No, no, it's
Right.
not.
So
Um,
how do you navigate that side of things?
well, luckily, well, in a way, firstly, I had a nice company who were quite understanding. And it's worth pointing that out that they were very good about me taking some time off.
Mm.
There was some negotiation though. What I originally asked for isn't quite as much as I got. So it was a bit of a discussion. But luckily, I guess I do market research, right? So I often have quite swings and roundabout style of working, and sometimes I get really busy. So,
Mm.
that will prevent me from doing much for a while. And then, if there is a quiet time, I will use it. And as a junior person, I probably didn't do that quite so much, but now I'm a bit more confident. I'm like, okay, well, if things are quiet, then I'm gonna nip off and do a little bit of birding,
Mm.
take the morning off and go to work about 10 o'clock, and then I've been out in the morning. Or maybe in the summer you can knock off a little bit early on a Friday to catch a flight down to wherever to chase a bird. So I think I'm quite lucky and privileged that I am able to do that. Not everyone will be. Yeah, so
Definitely, yeah, yeah. No, lots of good points. And yeah, and it is different for everyone, isn't it? Literally, everyone has a slightly different set of circumstances that they have to manage
yeah.
in terms of their birding, which is always good to remember. And so going back to the birds, then, what was now that you've concluded the big year, what was what leaps to mind when I ask you what was the best moment?
You're going to ask me that. Like, I mean, how can I choose with so many options, right? I mean, I've got stories. I've got lots of stories. I think that there's some white-throated needletails that I stuck around in a field for I don't know, I can't remember how many hours it was now, something like 24 hours across 2 days in the blistering
Wow,
sun,
wow,
where I decided my hat was unlucky. So I took off my hat and then got really sunburnt
brilliant.
because I'm very superstitious. Um, that was pretty cool when they finally flew over. Um, but I mean, yeah, the wandering tattler. I was told that a Nanking night heron, which obviously have in Australia. There's a site for them in New Zealand. I was told in summer that I would have zero chance, but I saw them, so that was great. I mean,
Yeah,
when you define the odds like that, that's really cool.
yeah,
I think the one that stood out for me is the most painful story. Was Kermadec storm petrel on the Kermadecs. It was a bird I was obsessing over. It was the one I wanted more than any other bird. And then while we were on this trip to the Kermadec Islands, the bird was seen and I missed it, right? So that's a horrible feeling.
mm,
And when I was obsessing over it quite so much, I was doing Facebook updates on a daily basis and every I think every single update, every single day, I was like, I really want to see Kermadec Storm Petrel. We haven't seen it today, but hopefully we'll get it tomorrow. Type thing. I was bigging it up in my own head, and then when I missed it, it was just horrifying. It was just horrible, right? I've never felt like that. That was the worst experience. And then luckily, a little bit later on, a couple of days later, not in the prime spot for them, we managed to re-find it, and I managed to see it. So, but when everyone else had seen it on the boat, and I'd missed it. Yeah, well, not everyone, but about half the boat had seen it, half the boat hadn't. But then to finally get that relief when you do see it, when you think it's all over, when you think you've got no chance, you've sailed off, and like to turn it round like that at the last minute. It was literally just as we were about to leave.
Wow.
I mean, it's just like I can't describe that feeling to you. It's like holy, what a moment. I think
Yeah.
that's got to be one of the highlights of the year, because the contrast between how crappy you felt at one point to how elated you feel when you finally get it. Yeah, it's just unreal. So yeah, I think that one's probably the best bird, but there's so many.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it strange that an animal can do that to us human beings? It's just amazing the feelings that we can get. It's
Yeah, no, people don't understand it, right? Like if you're not a birder, you just don't really know what all the hype's about. It's just a bird. But like yeah, when you put all this, I think, I'm a bit of a dreamer, right? Like I sort of imagine things, I romanticize things in my own mind, and that bird was one particular example. And yeah, like I build it up, I build up the big year,
that's right.
and I get really passionate about it. So yeah, I think that's what makes it so great when it works out. Obviously, there are some low points.
Yeah, no, for sure. You mentioned your Facebook group about your big year. I remember that now that you mentioned it. I think I'm. Is it a group or a page?
Yeah, it's like a page that I set up, just because I had a few drinks just before I started the big year, and someone said you should document it and keep a bit of a diary. So
Yeah.
yeah, it seems to have got some followers now, so that's good.
Well, that was what I was going to ask next. Is the followers aspect and the people who are aware of it? What was, because I believe the New Zealand birding scene is comparatively small.
Mm.
So what was it like to announce it, and through the year, did you become a big name of sorts in the New Zealand community of birders?
I'm not sure there is such a thing as a big name in the birding New Zealand community, but I mean, oh, there probably is. Sorry, I'm doing some people not good justice there, but I mean, yeah, it was nice. I mean, my reason behind doing that was to almost keep a diary, which I could reflect on, and I could watch back myself, and remember some of these moments. I wasn't really thinking about. I was kind of broadcasting it, but originally I was just going to write kind of little updates and stuff, and then I started doing a few videos, and I saw that they were getting more viewers, so I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe they're working better, and started doing that. But yeah, it was just like a really nice. I just quite like doing it, but it is. I don't know. Like every now and then, I go birding, and people will say, "Oh, I know who you are." And someone said that to me the other day. They said, "I know who you are." I'm like, "Oh, okay." I don't know who you are.
There's
So
something in
it was
that.
kind of cool. It was a nice little thing. I laughed about it, and I just thought, oh, that's really unusual. But yeah, a lot of people have seen it in New Zealand, and yeah, I mean, I did no marketing. I wasn't tagging or doing anything to kind of, hashtagging or anything to try and get it
Mm.
off the ground, but it seems to have attracted a bit of interest.
Yeah, yeah. It really interests me. This, the social side of birding and the people side of birding, the community, the groups, as I alluded to before, big names and well-known birders. That's always interested me. The dynamics of all that, and I suppose it must have, the fact that you had announced it publicly, and then and then you were maintaining this Facebook page with some updates and stuff. That must have kind of added some pressure to your trip and to your efforts.
Pressure and encouragement, right? So, like I think that I mean, I was quite surprised that people were sending me messages and, some of the comments and stuff, particularly young birders, which is also quite inspirational. Um, and yeah, it was just kind of cool. People sort of like, cheering me on almost. It's like, yeah, it was kind of cool. So originally it started off as just a way of kind of documenting things, but then once a few people kind of get behind it, then it's kind of nice. And I was more encouraged to do more videos, right? I mean, I'm not a video editor, I'm not a presenter. And most of the time I'm really tired when I'm doing those videos, right? But I just thought, I quite like the idea of just doing sort of 1 minute videos or something really short, just going, here I am at the moment, trying to capture that emotion that I had at that particular time. And I just thought there was something quite nice about it. And when writing the book, it's been really handy to actually watch those videos because I didn't keep a written journal or anything. Yeah, that's been quite useful actually.
Yeah, no, I can definitely imagine that, to have a trail of what had happened. I had a train of thought there that I've just lost, but we'll pick it up later. Oh yes. So now that you've done the big year, I purposefully didn't look into it deeper because I wanted to ask you, live, so to speak, and ask you how it all went. Are you now the top record holder or not?
No. Unfortunately, I'm second. But the previous record was 120 species before last year, and I saw 145. So that was good. That worked out quite well. But a friend of mine was also doing a big year, although he's never actually admitted it. He did say that he wasn't doing a big year, but you could see his numbers picking up, and yeah, he did really well. He got to 250, and he's a friend of mine, so I'm not like bitter, not that bitter anyway. Um, but yeah, I mean that's just great, right? Like two people, I think three people also broke the previous record, existing record that year, and one person equaled it as well. So it really was the kind of biggest year in New Zealand birding, which is the working title for the book.
Oh,
Um,
brilliant.
and yeah, I just thought there was something nice about that, right? And Dave, who broke the record, Dave Howes, we're friends, and we're on a lot of the same trips together. And he was the one who actually pointed out the Kermadec storm petrel to me because I had so much water in my eyes, which some people said that I was crying, but also I wasn't blinking in the wind, so you could look at it either way. And yeah, he was the one who was like, "Yep, it's just there." I was all flustered. So yeah, I think that we kind of helped each other out, reporting birds to each other and a few things. So it's kind of a friendly rivalry.
There is that camaraderie as well, almost banter in a way, isn't there?
Yeah.
About birding and big years, especially as well. Especially when you've got a couple of other people thinking of doing the same, and just there's lots going on. And so, why are you writing a book about it?
Well, this came from Facebook. So the messages on Facebook had at least 5 people say you should write a book.
Right.
So it was only about, I don't know, like March, April, where lots of people had mentioned it, where I kind of considered the idea of writing a book.
Right.
I don't have any writing experience, so yeah, I was just like, well, maybe I'll think about that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I think by about October, I just thought, yeah, I'm definitely going to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
thought I'd
good.
give it a bash.
Forgive me if I ask that a little bit bluntly, but I'm really interested in the reasons behind it because you know, writing a book is no small feat, and it'll take time and effort for you to write that. And so what I'm getting at is that the experiences that you have had during your big year are worth extra time and effort to share with other people and get that across in with pen and paper, which is fabulous. What can you tell me a bit more about the book?
Well, I mean, the book for me is like sort of reliving the whole experience over again, right? Like I had some amazing experiences. I did more travel than I'd ever done. I've been to places in New Zealand I'd never been. I saw birds I'd never seen. It was quite a journey, and I just thought, well, I really enjoyed writing it. I've written the draft. The publishers are working on it at the moment. But yeah, I just really enjoyed, except for one chapter on lockdown. I really enjoyed the whole thing, and like going back through all the Facebook posts and looking at the photos and even the eBird records to get the dates. So, because there's a lot to remember and make sure it's in the right order. Yeah, it was just really cool. And like, I just remember just sitting here at the desk where I'm sitting now at home, and I'd just write 5 or 6 chapters just like that, it would just flow out.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've gone back and edited it since, and the publishers will probably do the same. But yeah, it was just cool. Like I really enjoyed it. Like it wasn't like a chore or anything. It wasn't like a hard work. I'd mapped out all the chapters that I was going to write, and each one I looked forward to writing it. So yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Because there's something about books, isn't there? Especially bird books. You mentioned actually a couple of books that were inspirational for you to do that big year. So, and books can transport you in that sense. So do you have any particular? I've just thought of this question out of the blue. Do you have any particular regrets during the big year?
Yes. So if I would have been, so Dave Howells went to the Chatham Islands in March. So my plan was to go in November, which is when Auckland was in lockdown. So had I have been a bit clever, and I spoke to Dave the other day about this actually, and he said that that's why he went in March. I didn't think of it at the time. Yeah, I wish I'd have done a few trips earlier on, just in case a lockdown happened. Yep, so that's one. But I mean, ultimately, I think the other thing was, as I got further into the year, and maybe this was the pressure of the Facebook page that you were talking about, actually, that was the catalyst for this, is that I did start to put a lot of pressure on myself, and I think that I probably at certain points got too competitive and forgot for moments the privilege of what I was actually doing, right? The joy of seeing birds and going to wonderful places. I think I let the competitive side get the better of me, and I was miserable during lockdown as a result. Because yeah, I knew that wasn't going to happen, or it's going to be very difficult to make happen and break the record. So yeah, my regret is having that mindset, and I pulled myself out of it eventually.
How did you do that?
I think I think I just kind of talked to myself and reasoned with myself, like, why are you getting so upset about, numbers, essentially, right? Like you've just had the most magnificent 6 months of your life, you've seen amazing things, like I mean, lockdown happened in like August for New Zealand, and then carried through to mid-December. So it's quite a long period of time. But the first 6 months, everything went really well. In fact, when I was on the last podcast with Michael, I think I said to him, because that was during the year, I think I said to him, "Oh, everything's gone really well," and he said, "You shouldn't say that, Harry.
Yeah, he did.
You
Yeah.
shouldn't say that." Oh my God, like it was only a short period after that everything went wrong and we went into lockdown. And then between July and mid-December, I only added one bird to the list. So,
Wow.
and that was a very common bird, white-faced storm petrel, that I had to find someone to take me out on their boat and cost me quite a lot of money because it was just me and one other person in order to not break the rules of two households being together.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we went out on the boat, and I mean, I saw 150 of them. They're really common. How I hadn't seen them to that point, I don't know. So yeah, I think when you're talking about like regrets and things, yeah, having that attitude was a regret just because it made me really low.
Mm.
And also not going to the Chathams in March like Dave did.
Yeah, yeah. Hi everyone, hope you're enjoying this week's episode with Harry Boorman. Just a quick update from me. I've decided to start including a very short species of the episode segment in each episode, including audio I've recorded of the species, and if you're watching on YouTube, a photo I've taken of it too. What you're hearing today is the call of the Chimango caracara, a noisy and conspicuous scavenger in the Falconidae family, the falcons and caracaras. This species is common in the southern cone of South America, and this audio was recorded in Santiago, the capital of Chile. Now, back to New Zealand. I want to shift briefly to talk a little bit about Australian birding as it compares to New Zealand birding, because about 80% of my listeners are Australia based. But that's not to say, like, I'm fascinated by New Zealand, and I'm not going to hide the fact that one of the reasons I'm fascinated by New Zealand is because of Lord of the Rings trilogy, Peter Jackson's original trilogy, which
great films.
Oh, they're just mind-blowingly amazing, and some of that magic, paradoxically, I'm just thinking out loud here, but paradoxically, the magic of those films and the landscapes and the nature is almost like a character, and birds are part of nature. And so even though, you didn't have any particular bird species in those movies or anything like that, the magic somehow rolls over into my perception of New Zealand birding too. And I don't know if that makes sense to anyone, but
yeah, I think it does, because I mean, I can add to that as well. Is that, you go to native New Zealand forest and it looks like a storybook, right? And then that's probably not what you saw so much in Lord of the Rings, actually. But yeah, I mean, like, so many different parts of it look really unique, really distinctive. The birds are distinctive, right? That's one of my favorite things about New Zealand birding. I mean, it doesn't have the numbers of Australia. Australia's got amazing numbers, it's incredible. I love birding in Australia. And that's Australia birding's thing, right? It's got huge numbers, lots of color, lots of noise. It's full, it's dense, it's live, it's happening. That's its vibe. Well, I think in New Zealand it's a little bit different, right? It's more unique, but almost understated in a way, right? It's a bit more kind of secretive, it feels.
Yeah.
There are parts where you don't get many people. The birding community is small, so there's less birders. You go to a twitch here in New Zealand. I mean, a massive twitch here in New Zealand is going to be what, like 8 people? So
Really?
I think I'm just trying to think. The biggest twitch I've ever seen in New Zealand might be up to 20, to be fair. But yeah, it's not huge. Yeah, like England, I remember being looking for a brown shrike in Staines, just in London. I think there must have been close to 1,000 people there.
It's just ridiculous,
all
isn't it?
Fighting over each other, saying "get out the way" because it was a small bird in a bush, and it was almost like cue. I was quite good. I looked at the bird through my scope, then got out the way so someone else could see. But not everyone did that, and they were all shouting. It's just not like that in New Zealand. I think that idea of it being kind of secretive and understated, mystical is probably another word that I would use to describe New Zealand. Yeah, and more your own, because there isn't those people. There isn't actually. The birds that you find are quite specialist and so distinct, like the kiwi, for example, is the obvious one. But so many others. And I think that's what I really like about it.
Have you been birding many times in Australia?
Yeah, I've done. I can't remember my list for Australia. I think it might be like 400 species or something.
Oh yeah.
So not too bad. I've done a bit around Victoria, few trips to Sydney. I've been to Brisbane and Port Douglas, so a few spots, and it's great, right? And it's nice to be able to see so many birds in like a short space of time.
Right.
So yeah, no, I love it. It's got a different vibe, and I love that vibe, and I love the variety that bird watching offers.
And I want to dig deeper into the different vibe that you're describing in Australia. Is that mostly to do with the birds or the birders?
birding community in Australia, well, both New Zealand and Australia is really good. I mean, you
Mm.
go to Australia and you look at Birding Pow and how many people are on Birding Pow. It's unreal, right? You've got like for Sydney, I think there's like I can't remember how many there is. I've got a feeling it's like close to 30 or around 30 people who are offering to take you out in their time, strangers. You
Yeah.
know, I think that's really cool. And the birders that I've gone out with there are always, really good and really helpful.
Mm. Mm.
I think New Zealand's there's less birders, but they're also really helpful. I've got to shout out to like loads of people who helped me through the big year and drove me places and offered me their local expertise. So yeah, I think that the communities are really nice in both countries, but different.
Definitely. And I think Australia and New Zealand are almost, in some respects, one.
Mm.
Whereas this is another topic that I had written down that I'm also interested in is the comparison with UK birding and UK birders, which you briefly alluded to with the story. It's just so I find it's ridiculous. There's thousands of people. It's brilliant, but it's so different, and it's what's the word? Bustling comes to mind.
Yes, that's definitely it. Yeah. I mean, it's a big thing, right? Like it's not a huge thing in New Zealand, but it is kind of growing. I think in Australia, I feel like it's quite a big deal,
Yeah.
even for the population size, and
Mm.
the UK definitely a big deal, even for the population size. So yeah, bustling in the UK is definitely a thing. Australia's probably not bustling as such, but it's certainly, a bit more kind of popularist than in New Zealand.
That's right. I think when Fraser was on the show, he described that you would get that you sometimes get weird looks in New Zealand if you're walking around with binoculars in a park.
Oh, I get weird looks in lots of countries and places. I remember being in Cyprus, and I was at dinner with some friends of the family of a friend of mine, and I sort of talked to her about how I like bird watching. She said to me, she goes, "You were that guy in my garden the other day, or like in my garden with the binoculars. I nearly called the police." So
And
I
she
was
was
like,
serious. She
yeah,
was.
well, I mean, she was sort of had a smile on her face now. She realized I wasn't like a intruder or a pervert or something. But yeah, I
Wow.
think that you do get funny looks. People don't know what you're doing. I mean, essentially, you've got like all this equipment and binoculars, and you're kind of staring at things, and um, it probably can be a little bit creepy from the outside.
Yeah, and it's a shame in a way, isn't it? Because it couldn't be more innocent.
Yeah.
Looking at birds and enjoying the natural world and contributing to conservation directly or indirectly through bird watching. But
Yes.
I think yeah, I just and there's a bit of that everywhere. I think it's not like it's only in a particular place or anything, but in somewhere like the US, I think it'd be less likely that would happen because US birding is huge as well. North America and UK, that's where most birders live in the whole world. I think I would imagine in numbers.
Yeah, I bet you it still happens though. I mean, I try and I'm aware of that and that can happen. So my trick is to, if I see a passerby or whatever, I try and involve them or just talk to them about what I'm doing. So partly to be friendly, but also partly to kind of point out that I'm not a creepy weirdo.
Yeah.
Or I've actually got a purpose. This is what I'm doing, so you understand what I'm doing. So there's no awkwardness. I think it's just kind of nice to, and people quite often interested, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, if they're not, you kind of suss it out and move on. But a lot of people are really interested. I mean, just walking around with my telescope, which everyone says, "Oh, what are you taking pictures of?" because they think it's a camera. It
Oh
like
yeah.
shows a little bit of interest. And people don't know. People walk past these birds. They don't realize that there's a mega rarity on their beach or whatever. I was having this conversation with some strangers walking their dog the other day. Another wandering tattler actually that I went to see a couple of weeks ago. And I would say, "Oh, this bird here? Come and have a look through my scope. This is a pretty rare bird for New Zealand. Only about one, two a year at most. There's been two a year recently, but probably one a year on average." I was like, and that you tell them where it's from, and they get quite into it, I think.
Yeah. Scopes are great for that because it's
Mm,
it's a stable image. It's very zoomed in, You know,
Yes.
where
Yeah.
definitely, yeah. Did you use? Do New Zealand birders use scopes more than Australian birders? Do you reckon, in your experience?
I reckon less. I mean,
Mm.
particularly now. I mean, it's hard to tell really because I guess young birders mainly have cameras, right? And it's quite difficult to carry a big lens and a scope. I'm probably quite old school. I don't have a camera. I mean, I do have a camera, but it's not a big lens, not an SLR. Um, yeah, so I think that it's more of a generational thing. I think, and cameras are replacing scopes. I've still got my scope, but I am thinking about buying a camera now.
Oh, interesting. I was gonna. That was the other thing that I was thinking about is ask like through your big year, because some birders, only not many of them, but some of them only count birds when they have a clear picture of them as proof of sorts. Like here you go, I've seen this. Is that? And I sometimes think like that when I go birding. It's like when it's an unusual bird in a spot. It's like, oh, better get a picture of that one, just
Mm,
so I can put it on my eBird list and people won't think I'm fibbing.
mm.
Which, which is yeah, it's not great to think like that, and it's not. It's. But what do you think about that side of photography, of bird photography, as
It's
as
my main incentive for buying a camera. So it's not the photography itself. It's just so when I see these prions flying past, I can actually zoom in and identify them properly rather than just discard them as probably a fairy prion.
right?
You know, that's actually the number one driver for me of why I would invest in a big lens.
Mm,
For me personally, if it wasn't just about difficult to identify birds, I would, I'm quite happily with just being in the moment more with my binoculars and my
mm,
scope. I find that more rewarding.
mm,
And then my afterthought is to get a photo of it, so maybe I can put it on my Facebook post or
mm.
or whatever. So
But then again, that changes with the rarity levels of the bird. If it's very rare, then you'll think camera first, right? Surely.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the verification of things is difficult, and I probably hindered myself last year. Because I didn't take pictures of some of the skewers, so I never claimed Pomeranian skewer on my list because
Mm.
I possibly saw four,
Oh, really?
um,
Mm.
but never quite, and one of them wasn't that far away either, but I didn't even have my binoculars with me. I walked to the beach with a friend, um, and he had a camera on him. I said, "Get a picture of that," and he didn't.
Wow.
Not quite skilled to taking pictures of birds. He takes pictures of other things, like normal person. Um, so yeah, I mean, like I guess like I like to think I'm quite strict on that. So if I'm not 100% sure, I won't count it.
Mm.
Um, but a camera would certainly make that less stressful and much easier.
Right.
So, and a lot of the time I was birding with people with cameras, and I relied on their cameras to identify the birds that I saw.
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah, again, this is all part of the incentive to finally give in and stop preaching this. Oh, it's more in the moment. Proper birding's like with your binoculars and experiencing and being in the moment rather than trying to get the ideal shot. That opinion's wavering slightly now.
Yeah. No. Definitely. I think there's something in everything. There's definitely something in remembering to be in the moment and just enjoy a bird in the binoculars. There's nothing quite like that moment. Um,
Yeah.
Although I'm very big into video.
Oh, I've been thinking about video. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's such a magical way of capturing bird behaviors, and listeners are probably getting bored of me rambling about this on every episode, but it's such a really good. It's such a great way of capturing the essence of birds. You know.
I've actually been thinking about that as well. So, I'm thinking about buying a camera, but a lot of me just thinks um, I'd rather take video, just partly because it's a bit different, and there's just so many photos of birds everywhere now. Like it's like, well, I mean, yeah, and it's a snapshot in time, but the video, I think that what I was saying about being in the moment. If you're watching a video, you're actually watching the bird move around and interact and do cool things, right? Where a snapshot doesn't always capture that, and if it does, it doesn't capture the full moment. Um, I mean, some amazing photos kind of do, but
Mm.
yeah, and I think there's something quite endearing about that, and I do see it. But the fact that I haven't even got a camera, whether I'm going to invest in like video and software to edit it all and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
No, for sure. And just to close that particular segment as well is I am actually quite competent and passionate about video editing, which is partly why I love doing this podcast. It's quite techno based and there's lots of post production and and I like putting together these little documentaries. They're on, for anyone listening or watching. Just go on my channel Birding Today on YouTube, and I've only got three of them, but they're 10-minute episodes where I pretend to be David Attenborough and try my hand at doing that. And so I use all my own footage. I spend months gathering footage of different species, and then I write a script together, and then I go out. My wife films me, and I think about the screenplay almost like a movie where I'll lift my binoculars and then I'll put that shot that I filmed 3 weeks ago of the brown-backed honeyeater. So I digress, but there's so much to explore in birding that has tangents with other things like video editing and like screenplay writing and anything else really. And also just one last thought. I mentioned this in the last episode with Owen. But I went snorkeling out of the Great Barrier Reef recently, and recently I've been getting into iNaturalist. Have you heard of?
Oh yeah. That was how one of my birds was sighted because someone posted a random picture in their garden.
Oh really?
Yeah, through
Wow.
iNaturalist. Yeah.
Well, there
So
you go.
I know it now anyway from that moment when someone on Facebook forwarded it to me.
Fantastic. See, that's the reach of things like that, and so. When I went out snorkeling, we had an underwater camera, and we just started taking pictures of the fish that were underwater. And then when you post the pictures of the fish on iNat, it comes up with suggestions. And they're often quite accurate. And so what I'm getting at is that the diversity of nature is like it's not only in birds, but like there's whole fish families that you can read about, and it's. Do you have any particular natural interests apart from birds, perhaps?
Probably not. I mean, just I like seeing mammals as well. So when I've been to Africa and stuff,
Oh yeah.
it's great to see the lions and probably the things that normal touristy people would quite like.
Yeah.
But no specific interests in like bats or insects or anything like that.
Or reptiles. A lot of birders are into reptiles as well, I've noticed.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, they're kind of cool. So yeah, I don't really have. Yeah, it's just birds for me. It comes back to that moment of listing and the buzz that I get from it. So and being in the moment rather than learning about a whole new family of animals.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think I've got time for that.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think it's great to. I'd love to do a big year one time, but I guess this is. I wanted to say this right near the beginning when we were talking about it, but you're never really ready, are you?
No, I reckon just do it. Friend of mine's doing big year in Australia at the moment. Warwick Allen. You should speak to him actually. He just come from New Zealand and doing it now. I think he's doing quite well. And I think that it's not just like the mentality that I would have liked to have had that I was talking about earlier is just be in the moment and experience it. Don't think of it as a competition. Don't just focus on numbers. Let the big year and the pursuit of birds carry you to all these places and see all these wonderful things. So you don't have to like do a big year of a whole country or whatever, although it's quite nice to do so. Just let it just give you that little bit of extra incentive to get out and do a bit more birding and do it for yourself. And you don't have to see everything, but just kind of see what you can do in a year. I think there's something quite nice about that. So yeah, just get out and kind of do it, even if it's just in the garden.
And the competitive nature of birding that you are alluding to is interesting. Is an interesting psychological phenomenon, I think.
Yes,
isn't it? And it can be friendly and it can be helpful. I think it's not all bad.
yeah,
it's a fine line though, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's only. I think I think largely it's good. You watch the film and you kind of have a villain in it and stuff. It's.
Yeah.
I guess it probably can be where he's kind of tricking people. Anyone who's not like reporting their sightings for a personal gain, I think is that's just like against the rules of bird watching, isn't it? Really, they'd be disowned from the community for doing that. I think there's a few rants on forums about that. So yeah, I think as long as it's got good intentions and you help out your fellow birder, then like the competitive nature it should be fun, should be can be part of the incentive, and it gets more people birding. Yeah, and it should be a good thing, but I'm sure there's occasions where it's not.
You're listening to the Birding Today podcast, where birders come together to discuss the joy of birding with me, Thomas Doerig. Just as a reminder, there are 2 lucky listeners still to receive beautiful prints by Craig Boase from Wild Portraits, who has generously supplied me with 2 of these to give away. Conditions of entry are to like both the Birding Today podcast and Wild Portraits Australia Facebook pages, that's both of them, and then to send me an email at birdingtoday@gmail.com to tell me what your favourite episode is of the show and why. You'll then go into the draw to win one of these prints. Please find more details on Facebook and in the show notes. This is nice music. I feel like I'm somewhere exotic. Makes me think of a tropical place full of tropical birds. So another question that I always ask on the podcast, which I didn't prepare for this particular one, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts, is what makes a good birder?
I don't know, really. You better ask another good birder. I don't know. I mean, it's good if you kind of know lots of stuff. You're hot on your ID. You read stuff. You understand where things are. It makes you better at predicting where things will turn up. I don't consider myself in that bracket. I've been doing it for a long time, but yeah, I don't think I'm an amazing birder or anything like that. There's certainly better birders than me who helped me out on the big year. So yeah, I think that it's kind of difficult to say, really, because I don't consider myself as a good birder. So I think there's that like knowledge, but some people would just pick it up really quickly, right? There's this girl I've been out birding with recently on a few pelagics, and I don't know how long she's been birding. She's got into it through photography. Been birding a year maybe, and she always spots stuff, right? I mean, that's just instinctive. That's just a natural talent. I don't have that.
Wow.
I had to work hard.
It's interesting, yeah. There's different skill sets to manage and to improve over time. I guess one important aspect, maybe not so much in New Zealand, but one important aspect is the knowing the calls.
Yes.
But
yeah.
is that? I probably would suppose it's not as important in New Zealand.
No, probably not. I mean, the big year, the rules that we were working with meant that you had to see the birds. So unlike other countries where you can hear them. So, I mean, it would have been an advantage maybe at night to kind of hear petrels going over or something and being able to distinguish between those. But I mean, for my personal list, I don't like counting herd onlys. I mean, it's good for an eBird list. It's good for recording birds and data, but it's not very satisfying for me. So yeah, and luckily in New Zealand, there's not as many birds, so not as many calls to learn. So it's relatively straightforward.
Right, I'm on the same page. I think herd only is not enough. You
don't experience it. I mean, I'd love to hear a Kokako boom, right? Kakapo, sorry, Kakapo. That would be incredible. I've seen one, but I've not heard it boom. So there's something about that, because that's like a amazing characteristic of that bird. And there are other birds where I'd like to hear their calls, probably almost as much as seeing them. But generally speaking, I think you got to see it to appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. The Kakapo, I remember seeing David Attenborough's Life of Birds, where he documents that exact thing, where it goes up the hill and it digs a little dent in the ground and then it starts booming.
Incredible bird.
That's part of it as well, and the Kokako as well. The haunting chiming calls would be amazing to hear that.
The Kakapo, when I have seen one, and it was my 1800th bird, and to celebrate, I had an 1800 bird day party with my friends, all of which were non-birders, and I insisted that they all wear something bird related to this party. It happened to coincide with my birthday, and a lot of people thought they were actually turning up for my birthday. No, this is a bird day party. That's much more significant than me turning a year older.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, yeah. Have you got? Do you have different levels of what am I getting at? Your friends that are birders versus your friends that are not birders. Of course, the friendship levels are probably similar, or they vary. I don't know, but do you interact differently with your birder friends as opposed to your non-birder friends?
I reckon I talk about it just as much to both parties. And I get a lot of people at work and stuff ask me questions about it. A lot of friends, how's your birding? I got a message just before this about, how's your birding going? I mean, maybe it's because I talk about it and they know that I like to talk about it that they ask me. But yeah, I mean, they don't really understand it, right? It's quite hard to articulate what the driving force is behind it, that's relatable for someone who just doesn't have anything like that. So yeah, I think that like amongst birding friends, there is something because they get it.
Mm,
You're instantly friends, right?
mm.
You bump into a birder in another country because they've got certain shaped binoculars, and you instantly. I remember doing this in Fiji with an Australian birder actually, and we both looked at each other and at exactly the same time said, "You a birder?"
Like that, yeah,
So
yeah.
we went birding the next day together. Yeah,
Brilliant.
in Fiji. Yeah, it's cool.
It's such a powerful bonding thing, birding, isn't
Mm.
it? It
Yeah.
just brings people together, and it's just that's the whole aim of this show is to get to the bottom of where the joy of birding comes from. And it's a journey, and I still haven't found a concrete set of answers yet. But every guest has something to bring to that, and you've contributed to that greatly, Harry. So thanks again for coming on. Just a couple of closing questions, which I have to ask. What's your favorite bird in the entire world?
So it probably is the common kingfisher that started it all off,
Of
right?
course, yeah.
So that was a huge moment, but it's got to be the kakapo as well,
Ah,
just because that's such an amazing bird that I never thought I'd ever see. And then the significance of it being like 1800th, because
mm.
I knew that I was going to have an 1800 birthday party before I saw that bird, and that happened to be the one.
Oh,
So
nice.
so I think they're probably the two, and then like just anything like mega rare. I'd love to see that happy feet emperor penguin that turned up in New Zealand before I lived here. Something like that would probably put it on par with those two as well.
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah,
there's something going to happen in the future that will elevate it to that status.
definitely. Yeah, and a slight variation to that effect of that question is: do you have a dream bird that you haven't seen that would really, you know, be great to see?
I
Any?
mean, again, there's probably a huge list. I think somewhere on my phone I've written down my list of top 10 birds I'd most want to see in the world. I think there's at least 15 on it. But I mean, something like that emperor penguin turning up in New Zealand,
Mm,
you know, I think that would be really cool. And it would be not just the bird, but the significance it turning up in my country. Imagine if it turned up in Auckland, even better. Imagine, it's never going to turn up in the garden, but like, but like something that kind of makes it special, and makes that moment special. So rather than just the bird itself, because
yeah.
there's just so many. I think it's got to be something to do with the story behind it. Maybe that Kermadec storm petrel could be something, or maybe the last bird I saw on my big year, the Chatham petrel, on the Tycho before that. Like something with a story behind it that makes it special,
Mm.
would be my next dream bird, whatever that may be.
Yeah, very good point about the dream bird. Yeah, we tend to think of dream bird as, you know, the illustration in the field guide or the pictures. but the story behind a bird is really important as well, isn't it? And personal in many ways, and would change according to and how you see it. If it's a rare raptor that you're in some Southeast Asian river, and something flies over. I had that experience with the ruddy kingfisher in Borneo. Just flew millimeters above the water like that, and I was with my dad in a canoe. We were rowing. It's just part of it is actually more than we think. Maybe is to do with how we saw it than actually what the bird looks like potentially.
And I reckon that's why Kakapo's up there, right? I mean, it's a spectacular bird, don't get me wrong, but the David Attenborough series is what's kind of given it that story that attaches it to the bird itself. And I think that's why I struggle to just say kingfisher now, because I feel like, well, actually Kakapo, but both of those birds have got stories behind them for me. So that's why they're so great.
Definitely. Yeah. And in the same vein, closing question, the last one for you. If I were to say, okay, Harry, you've got 2 weeks, all expenses paid, you can go wherever you want in the world for 2 weeks to go birding, where would you go?
I'm gonna have to think about that one. I mean, I'd quite like to go for birding reasons only. Because I'd like to go somewhere warm, tropical, where there's colourful birds, but also where you feel like you can just wander around anywhere and feel perfectly safe and comfortable, and with no kind of threats. So Papua New Guinea probably wouldn't be the best place for that, but it would be one of the places I would put up there as places I'd like to go, just for the birds of paradise, really, and to see some of that. So yeah, if I had 2 weeks, I don't know if I'll ever go there because of the drawbacks of it, but and all the other potential destinations that you could go to. So possibly there, possibly India as well, just because I've never been. Actually, I think it would be India just because I've never been to that part of the globe. So there would be some element or feeling of uniqueness to that particular region, just because I've done lots of Asia, but on the eastern side and the southern side, southeastern, done lots of South America, North America, Europe, Africa. So India.
Yeah, good. That's a good answer. Yeah, I'd love to go to India as well. Variety of habitats there is astounding. They've got a lot of. I quite like the dry habitats as well. I love the inland of Australia. Something about it.
There's a few too many bugs for me. Don't really like those, so I probably won't go there.
Great birds though.
Yeah, definitely great birds. And I'd like to go there just for the day and then come back.
For sure. Well, hey Harry, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for your time. I feel like we could keep going on for hours, but time's coming short, I'm afraid. But it's been fabulous, man. So thanks so much for your time, and whenever, hey, I live in Cairns, by the way, which is a good hotspot for birds.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, I mean, I've been talking about going up there, so I missed the cassowary when I went up to Port Douglas. So maybe you could help me find that if I'm back in Cairns.
I will do so. Yeah, just hit me up and we'll organise it. No worries.
Cool. All right. Cheers, mate. I'll see you later.
Thank you. Right. Thanks.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Birding Today podcast. And if you've been watching on YouTube, thanks for watching. This has been a great chat with Harry. So thanks to Harry again for his time and his enthusiasm. I hope you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed participating in it. If you want to drop me a line, I'm available principally via email, birdingtoday@gmail.com. And don't forget that we've got that competition going. More details in the show notes. And that's it for today. So catch you in the next one. And if you want to support the show, I do have a Patreon page. I don't have enough time at the moment to be investing in the perks. So at the moment, it would just be my gratitude for you helping the show. So have a look at that if you want. That's also in the show notes. But that's it for today, and I'll see you next week. Thank you, and stay tuned. Bye-bye.